A guy like Rashad Phillips comes in and does work. I think that sends a great message to all these players to go back home and work on your basketball skills, because there's a lot of talent out there besides ourselves.
Rashad Keith Phillips, born May 5th, 1978. What happens when you've proven you're one of the best players at numerous levels and things still don't go your way in basketball? Well, like today's feature, you have to accept the things you can't control, adjust, and move on. The fact of the matter of making the NBA is not all the best players will get there. As you may have heard many times, there's players who haven't made it to that level, arguably better than some who have. What I do know is that in life, when you deserve something, it always finds its way to you. Choices we make, time spent on our craft, lack of this or that here and there are all factors that make whoever the guy is that made it over you more deserving, and that's just how the game goes. A cruel weeding out process that makes it that much more special of a game. As a guy who didn't make the NBA, I can appreciate saying that. By the looks of things, I think Rashad Phillips has his own appreciation for the things he's been able to accomplish in basketball, like once outplaying Kobe Bryant and 20 other prospects and future NBA players at the '96 Magic Roundball Classic, winning the game and coming away with the game's West MVP, all while he wasn't even supposed to be there. If you look at the original booklet for the game, his name isn't even on the roster. He was actually a Mateen Cleaves last-minute replacement that came in and played as he always did, with nothing to lose at just 5'7" at the time, but a will to show as always he could not only play with, but be dominant against the best of his era. He went on to become his hometown Detroit Mercy's all-time leading scorer, a record only recently broken in 2022 that stood for over 20 years. He was also a sniper from deep and held the record for that as well for 20 years and had his jersey retired for all the great things he did for the program, mainly putting them back on the map and in the postseason while showing that skill still mattered more than size. He shot 40% or better from three in his final 2 years at Detroit, adding at least 90% from the foul line as a senior as well. He was top 10 in scoring in both years. Rashad could definitely fill it up, no pun intended. He became an honorable mention All-American, Naismith Award winner for Player of the Year and back-to-back Conference Player of the Years, but even after all that, still didn't hear his name called in the 2001 NBA Draft. A reality he had no choice but to take in stride, even if his resume said he had done enough for that not to be. For these reasons, his growth was stunted. Let's talk about it. It's your boy JC Stunted Growth. Let's get it, man. Take a minute to like, subscribe, and comment on who I should do next. Rashad Phillips was a 5'9" point guard from Detroit, Michigan, North Central to be exact, that began his high school journey as an extremely undersized freshman, just 4'8". Besides the players who've seen Phillips in open gym and on local playgrounds that knew what he was capable of, the coaches had very little belief he would make the team because he was so small. He not only made it as a freshman, he became a 4-year starter and evolved by his senior year into the best player in the area according to Oakland County, who named him just that. He was averaging 25 points a game, 7 assists and 4 steals, but still overlooked on All-American rosters for bigger names in the class like Kobe Bryant, Mateen Cleaves, Tim Thomas, Richard Hamilton, Ed Cota, and more. He did happen to be called on as a replacement for an injured Mateen Cleaves in the Magic Roundball Classic in '96, winning, as mentioned, the West MVP, capping off a tremendous high school career. Stunt number 1, academically ineligible. If you look at the journey of basketball like an obstacle course before the big stage, one of the more difficult obstacles thrown at you to overcome is balancing having to go to school and be a high-level player. But not just attend school, you have to meet certain requirements to be deemed eligible to compete in the NCAA. I say it's difficult to balance because to be good at anything, it takes time to develop and polish those skills to where they protrude among the other players. A lot of times you will see an outstanding prospect without good grades, especially in those days, because their time spent leaned heavily towards getting better as a player and they neglect the classroom necessity. Rashad Phillips was an example of this case. In his actions, he decided at his size, in order to compete, he needed more time in the gym, and it hurt him when it was time for college. After his round ball classic performance, many big-name schools began looking into Phillips, but quickly shied away because they knew, at least for the first year, he would be ineligible to play and went in a different way. Detroit Mercy, just miles away from his high school, were the one team that stayed in the mix regardless and brought him in on a Prop 48, which meant still being aided financially and able to practice with the team, but as a freshman, he couldn't appear in games. Had Phillips gone to a different school, one more respected for its competition, and was able to come close to what he did at Detroit Mercy, that could have changed the outcome of his draft status. 1 year averaging 20 points at a premier college program is given much more credit and respect than at a relatively small school like Mercy, where competition isn't seen as elite all throughout the year. For a guy already receiving questions because of his size, it was the first time his growth was stunted as a player. Stunt number 2, his size mattered. In certain cases, the saying size matters doesn't apply itself. In those, so many other things have to go right for you not to be seen as a liability, instead a potentially effective player for a level like the NBA. Things like timing, your demeanor and behavior, and your ability to lead men much bigger and possibly more talented. And of course, your history that proved on the high school and college level that you could excel even at a diminutive stature. Allen Iverson, who was the league's MVP the year Phillips entered the NBA draft, who although listed at 6 foot, was more close to 5'11", even 5'10" in college, dominated at a school like Georgetown in a conference like the Big East on a nightly basis, leading the nation in total points as a senior. Listed at 5'10" but closer to 5'8", 5'9", at a school like Detroit Mercy, Phillips had an uphill battle to face. As a redshirt freshman, he was named Newcomer of the Year in the Midwest Collegiate Conference, and by his junior year, he was the Conference Player of the Year, an award he'd win back-to-back years, but the team failed to make the postseason in that time, which hurts a prospect's ability to be seen on elite stages and the outlook of a small school scorer in a team's eyes. Maybe if Detroit made a deep tournament run in his final 2 seasons, led by his captivating play, he may have had a shot in the draft, but because he couldn't prove size didn't matter in him leading his team to the promised land, it made it easier for him to be overlooked. Stunt number 3, the wrong era. Another overlooked but huge element that goes into whether a guy makes it and the other doesn't a lot of times is the era they played in. It's like comparing players that played in the NCAA or NBA before the implementation of the three-point line. Imagine how much more those players would have scored in total or averaged. In Phillips's case, coming up in the mid-90s and early 2000s, I agree with his own sentiments that his style of play was not yet understood as good basketball. In those times, for a player to take a deep 3 in transition or early in the shot clock without the ball touching the post was rare at best. For one player to dominate the ball at his size and shoot it at the end of the clock was also not mass thinking among coaches as the right way to play the game. In an era like today, Phillips would be praised for shooting 40% from 3 his final 2 years, especially seeing the amount he took per game. Add to that, he wasn't a traditional pass-first point guard that averaged 7+ assists. At 5'9", this is difficult to sell without a ton more accolades and achievements. All in all, Rashad Phillips still became a professional for a decade overseas and gives back to the game through youth camps and personal training. He also gives game in interviews all over YouTube, sharing his story and his insight into the game. He was a nice player in college, but whether he deserved to make the NBA or not, only he knows. What I think is for these reasons, his growth was stunted. Salute, much respect. It's your boy JC Stunted Growth, and I'm out.